Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's RB again. We're going to go on and do another Tales from the Video Store with the top VHS Rentals of 1986. We're going to start off with some events that happened in 1986. Mike Tyson became the youngest heavyweight champion, defeating Trevor Berbick. Also in 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded, which I was pretty young at the time. We were still in school and we were watching it on TV, and of course we got to see it blow up, and then the teachers turned it off. Then we went home and it was on the news. The news was cutting through regular shows, with updates showing what had happened, if they found any wreckage, why it blew up. This went on for a couple days. You'd be watching cartoons or a TV show, then the news would just kind of interrupt saying, well, we found a piece of the shuttle over here, or a piece of the shuttle over there. This went on for a little bit. It's a tragedy for its time. Also, the Chernobyl meltdown happened. It was still the USSR, I believe, over in Chernobyl in Ukraine, I believe. I wrote some notes down. Yeah, over in Ukraine, reactor number 4 had a meltdown, which caused their disaster to happen over there, where, that area is uninhabitable. I'm sure it's still not safe to live there still. I think they were going through a practice run of if what would happen if one of them shut down or had a failure, and then it just got out of hand and they couldn't stop it. So those are a few things that happened in 1986. I could keep on going on for a bunch of other things, but I'm going to try to get on into, why we're here is for movies. Not all these disasters that happened in 1986. But before we get into the top VHS rentals in 1986, I figure I'd go over some songs from the Billboard Top 100. I remember riding in the back of my parents' car, especially if my mom was driving, smoking Salem cigarettes with all the windows up, getting a headache from all that smoke. But on these car rides, there were some songs on the radio, because my mom just listened to, the pop radio station. So growing up, some of these songs are burned in my brain from, being in the car, traveling up and down the road, especially when we had more than one video store, driving up and down the highway just with the radio on. Some of these songs stuck out to me, so I picked 10 songs that I really remember from 1986, riding up and down the road. With number 1 being Mr. Mister, Broken Wings. I remember hearing this song. It was on MTV at the time, I believe, because my parents would watch MTV during the day, or my mom would, because owning a video store, my parents wouldn't work in 9-to-5 jobs. Their business was a video store, so pretty much work when you want. They'd take turns running the store, and eventually we would hire help, and neither one of them would really work. Just be home all the time. Song number 2 would be Robert Palmer, Addicted to Love. Everybody remembers that video. It's got all the girls that look the same. They're dancing in the background, playing fake guitars and basses. It's an alright song. Pet Shop Boys, West End Girls. I remember that riding in the car. It's nothing I listen to now, but when I was looking up, doing some research, and I listened to songs, like, I remember that song being on the radio quite a bit. Peter Gabriel, Sledgehammer. It had a cool video. I remember on MTV, it would catch my attention if I walked through the room, or the living room, just as the video was on. It's kind of like a stop animation type thing with a bunch of, I remember his head having a train riding around it or whatever. But maybe it's probably been a couple decades ago now, though. There's a super group called Northern Kings. It's kind of like a symphonic metal band. They redid a bunch of 80s songs, and this was one of the songs they remade. If you got time, check it out. I like that version quite a bit. Berlin, Take My Breath Away, and Kenny Loggins, Danger Zone, both from Top Gun soundtrack. both songs are cool. When I was a kid, I wasn't trying to dance around, listening to Take My Breath Away or whatever, but Danger Zone was always cool. And, before you get old enough to buy your own music, buying your own stuff, Danger Zone would come on. I'm like, oh man, where's my G.I. Joes at? Or where's my Hot Wheels, because I want to play with them when that song's playing in the background. Good song. Bon Jovi, You Give Love a Bad Name. It's an iconic song. Bon Jovi's cool. He's kind of the in-betweener. He could be on Headbangers Ball, and he can also be on regular MTV, and he can be on a rock radio station, and some of his songs can be on the pop radio station. Actually, my kids years ago in elementary school had a music program where they sung Bon Jovi songs wearing white t-shirts and jeans. It was cool. So, Bon Jovi's everywhere. He's a made man. Bananarama, Venus. All I can think of is women buying razors to shave their legs for this song. They're still using this song for, Schick razor or whatever it is with the, women shaving their legs, so they don't get no nicks on their legs. Bangles, Manic Monday. That song gets in your head. I always thought it was Cyndi Lauper. When I'm little, I think the same person sung Girls Want to Have Fun and Manic Monday. It sounded the same to me. I'm 6 or 7 years old, And then Eddie Money, Take Me Home Tonight. That's a good song, good rocking song. There was also a movie back in 2011 with Topher Grace called Take Me Home Tonight that was based in the mid-90s, I guess, because I think the guy was working at Babbage's or Electronic Boutique at the time. So, that's a good movie. Kind of like Hot Tub Time Machine. I like the movies where they kind of try to go back in time. Also, with some current stuff, I want to try to put my 2 cents in on Avengers Doomsday teasers being dropped. They've had the first one with Captain America, or Steve Rogers, holding his baby, saying he'll return in Avengers Doomsday. There's a Thor one where he's in the woods talking about, he's got a son now, and give him strength to fight this battle, save his kid, I assume. And then at the time of this recording, there's an X-Men one that dropped, but nobody's uploaded a really good quality version of it, which I'm surprised if people's phones and you're in the theater, so much stuff leaks and gets out in good quality. I don't know why this one, I don't know if YouTube's taking it down all the time or what, but as you'll see, I don't know, I'll have to show you some other time. I've got a backdrop set up right now that I can kind of change around with some movie posters and stuff. Up here to my left, you got Dawn of the Dead. Over here to the right of my head, move this way, you got Transformers the movie. I'm trying to do this backwards, over here behind me, I got a signed Ricky Rackman poster where I seen him in Nashville in 2023. But next to that is an original print signed by Jamie Tyndall. He's a comic book artist. I'd move the camera, but I got too far away. Next to that, I have a Frank Miller Wolverine #2 tin poster sitting there. And then, of course, over on the other side, I got some more original artwork from the IDW Transformers. Long story short, what I'm trying to say is I'm also a comic book fan. I always have been. I used to love the doodle. I love the draw. Especially when I had time, I'd sit around, you read comic books, you try to draw figures. But this Avengers Doomsday trailer has a Jim Lee accurate Cyclops. He's ripping off the visor and letting his optic blast blaze full blast. You see some giant legs in the background walking around. I'm assuming they're Sentinels. I'm looking forward to this. Back in the day, I didn't give, X-Men a chance. I didn't go to theater and watch first X-Men because I thought, well, here we go again, another comic book movie made to be campy and cheap, used to that bootleg was floating around in the 90s of that Fantastic Four. And, we had the Spider-Man live action TV show, the Hulk, Trial of the Hulk, Hulk battles Thor and that weird Daredevil in the black uniform. There was never any, besides cartoons, there was never really any good live action comic book stuff that had come out. I know Blade had come out, which was really cool, but at the time they were trying to pretend Blade wasn't a comic book movie. It just kind of got put out and was like, oh man, this is a cool, dude killing vampires. Had a good cast, Wesley Snipes, Stephen Dorff from The Gate. I personally like Blade 2 out of all of them. The guy from Sons of Anarchy, Ron Perlman, had that group of vampires and they're all hunting and, kind of teamed up. And my man Chris Christopherson's in it, which, in a future video, I did hang out with Chris Christopherson one time to kind of give a little context to this story in 1990. Because I was probably 10 years old, because I've got a picture that I'll put up. I'm at my uncle's video store, and Chris Christopherson he was with the Highwaymen or something, but this wasn't the Highwaymen. It was just him by himself. Flatbed trailer next to the video store. Played a concert. He hung out inside in the office, and I took a picture of him. Of course, at the time I'm a kid. He's just some old dude to me, some old cowboy looking guy, and I don't like country music anyway, because that's what his music sounded like. So I was just there because my whole family was there running the event. So, but I'll deep dive in that in the future. It's cool looking back on. Of course, at the time, like I said, I didn't even know who he was. But anyway, this Avengers Doomsday trailer looks cool. I know there's a fourth one that's getting ready to drop. I think Super Bowl will get a full trailer. I'm looking forward to it. I know a lot of people, you either like the comic book movies or you don't. And I know this last pandemic to now, all the Disney Plus stuff has been really subpar. People really crapped on the She-Hulk, which me and my wife watched it. My wife liked it. It's kind of got that 13 going on 30, how to lose a guy in 10 days. Like, I get what they were trying to do with it, and they were just using some comic book people. Of course, me, I'm a comic book fan, so I'm like, man, the Wrecking Crew's in this, and they're getting wasted away, in the She-Hulk stuff. It's fun, but I get why hardcores don't like it. I never did watch the Marvels with all the different Miss Marvels together. So I think there was like a ballroom dance scene in it. Didn't care for it. I watched that's not Secret Wars, the Secret Invasion or whatever, trying to do the Skrull invasion storyline. And I remember when the last episode happened, I was like, that was the last episode? Like, they got all these characters to mess with, and they kind of rushed a bunch of stuff out. I tried watching Echo. I never did finish it. I did watch the Hawkeye with his daughter, whatever that was called. That was pretty good. But, the last stuff that I saw, like the Daredevil, Born Again, that was really good. I love the Punisher. That John Bernthal Punisher is awesome. I know he's going to be in that new Spider-Man movie, a toned-down version, if I'm reading right. But we really don't know until we watch the movies. Until they come out, it's just everybody online speculating or saying they know somebody who knows somebody. I enjoy them for what they are. I don't want to be too critical. I know that's what we're here for. We like talking about our movies, and we're passionate on something. It's like, man, I can't believe they did this. My only gripe before I move on, because I'm getting on a tirade here, they always say, well, they make these movies for the general audience, not, the hardcores or the source material. I always say, your general audience doesn't even know the source material, so why don't you follow that more closely and you please both audiences? Because either the general audience is going to be like, hey, that was pretty good, and they'll like it anyway, or they won't. And the people like, somebody like me who's been reading comic books since I was, 10 or 9, I'm like, oh man, they're going to do this, and then they change it a little bit, and it's like, oh man, I don't know why they, changed this or did that or didn't follow through. I could talk about the Dark Phoenix stuff they've done in X-Men movies where they've dropped the ball 2 times. It's like they want to use these characters, but I've always said they want to do a new X-Men movie, make it a series. It seems like even a 2 or 3 hour X-Men movie nowadays, there's not enough time for you to put everything that needs to be in that storyline into one movie. That's why we get like the Dark Phoenix with, where Magneto and her teamed up, and she's in like an apartment building in Brooklyn, New York, and they're fighting in a subway with some street level aliens, you know. Just don't do it, or do it right, you know. I mean, either way though, I guess we can be like, well, I'm thankful they even made something with these characters. But sometimes they just throw it away. Like Deadpool 2, you know, X-Force is in it and they just jump out of a plane and get killed. And, you know, in my head, X-Force should have its own movie or series, and Deadpool gets, you know, introduced through that. But, you know, my tirade's over. It is what it is. I'll still watch them. Everybody's going to watch them, you know. Let's move on from there. But I'm going to go ahead and get started with the top VH rentals in 1986. I got the information online. I looked at a few sites. I know Reddit always has stuff, but I don't know how accurate it is. So I'll get these UPI website. I kind of pulled from some of that. I forget the other one. But, you know, they'll have the sales data, or I guess I get it from Billboard also, and various newsletters, which I know last episode we went over that Thorn EMI catalog from 1983. I found another one from 1985 or 86, and I'm going to tell you, a lot of those same movies are in that catalog too. Well, you know, with some new ones, but, you know, I guess they'd make a stockpile of these VHSs, and they would just sit in a warehouse, and they're just going to keep putting them in that catalog every month. And it's went on for a long time. But I kind of explained that in the last episode, that, you know, some of these movies would linger around for a while before they get sold out or re-released, whatever the companies would do. Also, in one other bit of current news at the time of this recording, I did read on the Dawn of the Disc website that Vinegar Syndrome has acquired the rights to a bunch of Warner Brother movies. I guess TV movies and some other odd stuff. The stuff is right up that alley for that company to put out, which I'm excited for, you know, because for us physical collectors, we're just rebuying a lot of the same stuff over and over with a different slipcase. And now we're getting to the point where, like, Day of the Dead comes back out. Well, George Romero's dead. So what new stuff will we get? And then what stuff will we lose, you know, from the original DVD releases, like commentary or behind the scenes featurettes? Because I'm a completist type person, you know. If something comes out, I want everything on it if possible. But I've lived and learned to not get rid of my old stuff and keep the new stuff in case I want to go back and look at everything. Even though, I mean, I'm getting older and, you know, I don't have time to sit around, waste hours of a day to, you know, rewatch behind the scenes of Tom Savini and them, or whatever it could be, you know, listen to commentary. You know, some movies have 3 different commentary tracks, and I'm like, oh, I want to listen to the directors, and I'm going to listen to the actors, and I'm going to listen to the producers and a makeup artist. You know, I don't have that much time anymore, but that's some pretty cool news. Hopefully some stuff we haven't seen will come out is what I'm trying to get at, because, you know, how many times can, I don't know, Scream get re-released, or, you know, Mandy, or some Hellraisers, or, you know, Dusk Till Dawn, Tank Girl, you know, just, you know, stuff just keeps getting re-released and re-released. And it'd be nice to see some new stuff, but I believe we're also getting to the point where what else is there? Because some of these boutique labels, you know, Severin, Scream Factory, Arrow, I mean, we're getting like these deluxe 4K editions of, I'm gonna make something up, like Wheels of Fire, you know, all these cheap B, C-rate Mad Max Wasteland movies that came out in the, you know, 80s and maybe the early 90s. We're getting like a, you know, 4K 2-disc, you know, Vinegar Syndrome edition of, you know, I don't know, a chained lust vampires or something, you know, just oddball stuff. It even when it came out, it might not have rented that good when it was new. People even knew, man, it's kind of garbage, this movie. But, you know, here we are thirsting for, you know, new material, and it's like we're trying to keep some of these movies alive from being lost, because every time a new format comes out, we're losing something. I mean, there's still movies that are on VHS that never made it to DVD there's still DVD movies that have never made it to Blu-ray, and on up, or some stuff skipping DVD, and it's like, oh, it's only on VHS, now we're getting a 4K, or like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 sequel, American Nightmare, or something like that. Somebody who just recently found all the reels or whatever, and they're going to try to put that out. It's just like, we have everything, but then again, we don't have everything. Like, look how long it took for a movie we'll touch on briefly with this episode or this video, Rad. Like, man, that thing was on VHS forever. Bootleg DVDs where it was on like back in the mid 2000s, you start getting little HD boxes with your Dish Network or DirecTV or your local provider, and they'd have movies on demand, and it would change every month. And I think Rad had showed up on one of those, and somebody made a couple burned DVDs, and quality's good. I had one for a long time, and then then that 4K of Rad come out, and then like Mondo put out a steelbook, and it's not hard to find anymore, but it skipped DVD. It went VHS straight to Blu-ray 4K. So anyway, on to the main part of this video. The top rentals, of course, are not my picks of what I loved back then. And I'm still young, but now we're starting to get into some movies that I watched quite a bit later on in life. Maybe not this set, but we're starting to get into stuff where I'm like, oh man, I remember that, or something might be new to somebody 2 years later. That was the beauty of the mom and pop local video store, because sometimes you get movies not when they're new, but maybe later on they'd go down in price, or as one episode we'll get into where video stores would trade titles amongst themselves, be like, well, we don't have this movie and you don't have this movie, why don't we go ahead and make a trade? Because back then there was customer loyalty where a customer wouldn't go to this other video store. They would just come to you all the time. They wouldn't go into the other, somebody else. So stuff like that would happen. But anyway, so let's get into the top rentals of 1986. Coming in at number 10 is Space Camp. It's got Marty McFly's mom, Leah Thompson, LeVar from Revenge of the Nerds, Larry B. Scott, and a young Joaquin Phoenix. John Travolta's late wife, Kelly Preston, is in this movie. I watched this as a kid once or twice. It was put in the kids section at my mom and dad's video store. It wasn't with drama or action or wherever it would have ended up at. It wasn't like it was sitting next to 2001, 2010, or THX 1198, 93, or whatever that movie's called, or Andromeda Strain. They put all these space looking movies all together. Space Camp didn't end up over there. My parents knew it was made more for kids or younger people. It's about a group of kids, young adults. They accidentally get sent into space. They got like this little robot buddy. I think they were all on the shuttle trying to, they're doing like a pretend launch, and they end up really going up there. And they got to survive and get back home. It was cool. Especially when you're a kid. A lot of kids when you're young, you're like, man, I'll be an astronaut or a fireman or whatever. So, but this movie did come out right after what I just talked about previously, the Challenger explosion, and it still made it into the top 10 of that year. So that shows you that people were looking for maybe more of a lighthearted, shuttle story than what real life was portraying at the time with that tragedy. I did look up, and the Space Camp movie did go into let me read this here. In 2016, it went into the Space Camp Hall of Fame by the U.S. Space and Rocket Center Museum in Huntsville, Alabama. So that's pretty cool. Another thing I remember about this movie was the VHS cover. Kind of reminded me of like a book. you know, when you go to the book fair or whatever, the cover had this, like, if it was a book, this would have been the, you know, exactly what that book would have looked like. And you turn on the side and be like, oh man, it's a VHS tape. That's my memories of it. You know, I didn't watch it a whole bunch, but I did watch it a little bit, and I do remember the box. Coming in at number 9 was Pretty in Pink. Funny enough, me and my wife just watched this like some old timers on one of the antenna channels. We got home and we were sitting there, and I turned on the guide, because, you know, we'll watch the news or Wheel of Fortune or whatever comes on ABC, CBS, NBC, and I think it was like, you know, whatever number -2, it shows just movies, and Pretty in Pink come on, you know, the TV version, you know, so we turned that on. That's probably the first time I've watched it in a real long time. When I was younger, I wasn't watching Pretty in Pink. You know, it was made for teenagers and stuff. You know, it wasn't even on my radar as a child. But, you know, you get a little bit older and you start going back, and it's like Breakfast Club, you know, Pretty in Pink, Some Kind of Wonderful, you know, well, I ain't gonna say Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. I watched that as a child. But I'm trying to think of, like, you know, St. Elmo's Fire. That Was Then, This Is Now. You know, the teen drama stuff. You know, when you're a little kid, you're not worried about watching any of that stuff. Pretty in Pink has Molly Ringwald, John Cryer as Ducky. As I'm sure a lot of people, when you go out and find used DVDs, it's like the Ducky edition of Pretty in Pink is what I normally run into, you know, for $1.50. James Spader's in it, Andrew McCarthy. Plus, you know, like little side characters in it. Like Andrew Dice Clay is in this movie. He's like a bouncer. Dweezil Zappa is in this movie. Christy Swanson, you know, from Deadly Friend, and, you know, The Chase with Charlie Sheen, and Buffy Vampire Slayer. You know, she's in this. Gina Gershon is in it. Basically, you know, watching it, I guess Molly Ringwald was low class or low middle class. She worked at like his record store. The rich girls was picking on her, and she's got like a dress, trying to go to prom. Basically, that's what the whole movie is, her trying to go to prom, and the guy that likes her, I guess, is a soch, if we want to use outsider terms, and he kind of likes her. And of course, the John Cryer character's the dork, you know, wears like the suspenders and the little hat and all that. You know, watching this, like, maybe when I was in high school, like, man, we can't wear hats in school. How are all these kids getting away with wearing this stuff? I guess it was different back then. So, but, you know, it's a good movie. John Hughes wrote it. He didn't direct it, but it's a John Hughes film. And, you know, I can appreciate John Hughes films completely. You know, I can always turn those movies on and just let them play, or, you know, before everything just being on demand. You know, you walk in to turn on your satellite, like, oh, hey, man, you know, one of his movies is on, just turn it on, let it run. But we're going to move on to number 8. Number 8 is Police Academy 3. Like I mentioned in a previous video, we had Police Academy 1 and 2 in those big box clamshells, and this was the first one we got that was in what I'm going to call standard size VHS. But I do know there is a big box of this too from Warner Brothers. I was sitting here in my other videos saying, well, you know, when I talked about Police Academy, that, well, number 3 standard size, and I can't believe I'm at a flea market, not a flea market, but like one of those, I was at like a vendor mall, and here's Police Academy 3 in a dusty box of VHSs. Big box, big clam. I was like, I've never seen this part 3 in this big box, and here it is after I was, you know, my previous videos. Well, number 3 is when it starts being standard size. So they did make a big box version of Police Academy 3, because I saw it. I was going to buy it because I knew I would eventually talk about it. You figure I'd have all these videos planned out ahead of time, but it's just like every week I try to make one, and I'm trying to not just do, you know, top 10, top 10, top 10, because we're getting ready to get into an era where I can really deep dive into some other movies and stuff that I really like. So, you know, the whole Police Academy series, we might do a whole video on just that whole series, even though it did drop off later on. But that VHS had mold on it. Now, if you're a VHS collector, that's the first thing you look for. You know, you look at the tape, see if there's a bunch of mold on the actual tape. And if it is, it's like, nah. I know there's a machine you can buy that can clean the mold off, but I don't really watch VHSs that much. I just try to collect the ones and movies I really like. I don't have it in here, but like I got a 2-tape Dawn of the Dead. That was the first time I ever saw the director's cut. I had a Night of the Living Dead. It had like green foil for the logo of the movie, and the second tape was George Romero and all the guys talking about how they just kind of got together and made the movie. I keep those VHSs, stuff that's, I don't know, sentimental to me. Inframan. If I had a VHS of Rad, I'd hold on to that. But of course, I've never seen one, or seen one that's affordable. There was there's a town maybe 30 minutes from me that has like a big flea market that you got to pay to get into. And I went in there one time and a guy had a copy of Rad, but $150. And I wasn't going to drop $150 on a tape I'm not really going to watch. So, but anyway, Police Academy 3. This one was rated PG. The first one's rated R. Part 2's rated PG-13. This one's rated PG. I believe they're getting into the mindset of, well, if we don't make these as raunchy, we'll get the kids and the adults all in one hit and make even more money. Or that's what I think, why they were toning it down. Plus that cartoon was on the horizon. I think another year or two the cartoon shows up, so they're trying to appeal to everybody, which kind of hurts them later on, because I think Police Academy 4 or 5. Anyway, the one that's got Bigfoot in it kind of isn't any good. I go with Mission to Moscow. It's like, nah, that wasn't very good either. But part 3, they kind of move into more Naked Gun-ish territory. A lot more of that type of humor. They're jet skiing and racing these guys, or trying to get them, and Bobcat Goldthwait's like knocking them down or knocking them off. Speaking of Bobcat Goldthwait, this is also him and that, what's his name? The little guy, they're always get Sweet Chuck. This one has the pairing of Bobcat Goldthwait's character and the little Sweet Chuck guy together a whole bunch. It's also got that, I think his name's Mauser or Moser or whatever. In part 2, they put the Nair in his shampoo bottle and he washed his hair and all his hair fell out or came off. This one, his eyebrows get removed, and he's got the painted on eyebrows looking like, pink flamingo or something, all that stuff's funny, Tackleberry, there's that guy in the non-smoking section of the beach, or I forget where he's at, but he shoots the cigar and blows it out the guy's mouth a little bit. A lot of that type of humor. I don't even know if the Blue Oyster's in this one. I'd have to go back and rewatch it. Maybe not, since it's PG. So, but anyway, going on to number 7 is Poltergeist Part 2. I watched this quite a bit when I was younger. It's another VHS. I know, well, at least in our store, I don't want to state the fact that, Poltergeist 1 was in a big box, and then Part 2 was not. Part 2 could have had a bigger box too, but I know we had a standard size VHS for Poltergeist 2. This film's got a heavy Native American presence to it. Stands out to me because I got a lot of Native American in me. I belong to a Native American tribe and all that. But I'm not like going to protest on the street that, the Chiefs logo, or what it used to be, the Indian head and the Redskins, like that stuff never did bother me. And I don't think it never bothered really any real Native American people. That would be the stuff I'd buy if I'm out somewhere. Like, oh, it's got that big old Indian head on it, man, with the feathers, man, that's cool. But, during, years ago, they wanted to strip any kind of nationality from anything. It's kind of like, taking Aunt Jemima off the syrup bottle, or taking Uncle Ben off the rice. That, I don't really think that stuff matters that much. I'm not making this like a political thing. I'm just saying, me personally, I'm Native American enough. I belong to a tribe, and the stuff they were trying to promote, like, it's like, it didn't bother me. And I got family members that live up in Minnesota at the reservation, and it didn't bother them either. That stuff didn't bother none of us. So, but anyway, before I get into a wormhole I'm not gonna be able to get out of, Poltergeist 2. It's got, Carol Ann, they're back. Has a lot of the tropes from the first movie. There's still the toy phone still ringing. That old creepy dude's rolling up on him, look like he's about to pass away or something, kind of got that tall man vibe from Phantasm. He's probably the scariest thing out of the whole franchise. What stands out to me though is Coach, old Craig T. Nelson. He drinks that old tequila or whatever and swallows that worm, and then he goes home and he's acting weird, and he throws up that old monster demon out of his soul or whatever, and that thing's like coming to life under the bed, and it's flopping around, and you get that one good look at it when it looks at him. And thinking about that thing, the effects, that really reminds me of Frank in Hellraiser when he came back to life after that blood dripped on the floor, way he kind of got them ribs hanging out and stuff. That monster thing kind of reminds me of Frank now that I think about it. You could tell a movie like that has some money put in it. Steven Spielberg, it's a good movie. That's about all I really think I got to say about Poltergeist 2. The braces attacking, that kid's braces start trying to strangle and kill that kid. In the first one, you got the clown. It's, trying to pull the kid under the bed. If you're a younger kid watching these, this movie will scare you. Poltergeist won't scare you if you're young enough, but a lot better than part 3, which, is going to come up in a year or two. So, but anyway, going to move on to number 6, rental of 1986. It's The Money Pit with Tom Hanks and Shelley Long. I watched this maybe when I was little, but a lot of the stuff was going over my head. I'm just looking for, like, Tom Hanks to fall through the floor, like old slapstick type of comedy. But once you get older and once you buy your own house, this movie has a whole nother meaning. It's funny in a bad way. Me and my wife, we bought this house a while, years ago, but it had all kinds of problems that were hid or band-aided, and then once we're in here, it's like, oh man, we got to replace this. This is messed up. This didn't last. It's like, as soon as we moved in, had to replace the whole, heating and air system. It was, it's $6,500 or whatever. I need new gutters. Oh man, these windows aren't very good. All the floors, sinking in over here. What was crawling into the house to see what's happening? Hot water tank goes out. It's just everything happened within like the first year or two we lived here. So whoever gets this house after us is going to get an immaculate house that they won't never have to fix anything, especially once I put a roof on it here soon. So, and it don't even really need that. I'm just doing it just to do it. So when I sell it, I can say, hey, it's got this, and try to get a little extra cash out of it. So, but yeah, The Money Pit. This is before Big. So Tom Hanks in Big hasn't come out yet, which is what I remember Tom Hanks for the most, especially when you're little. They did a good job in the 80s of making, like when you're a kid, you want to be a grown-up as fast as you can so you can do whatever you want, or that's what you think. And, as a parent, it's like, man, if you can be big and learn stuff, then you can go back and be a kid again, it's just... That was my intro to Tom Hanks. Besides Bachelor Party, I'd seen that on TV, where I mentioned that in a previous video. And Shelley Long's in this from Cheers. That's what I know her from. As a kid, I had a TV and a VCR and a Nintendo in my bedroom. I thought this was normal. I'd go over to friends' houses and they wouldn't have a TV in their room, whatever, but it never dawned on me like it was special to have anything like that. I had a lot of friends in the 80s, they didn't have a TV in their room. They didn't have a game system, stuff like that. So what I'm trying to get at, I had a TV in my room, but, I didn't have cable. We had a big satellite dish, but that was hooked up to the, the living room. Maybe my parents' bedroom. Maybe they had it, spliced or whatever. But, I had just the regular channels on the antenna or whatever. So when you're young and you're trying to stay up on school night, there ain't no cartoons on. unless you're watching something, you know, a tape. So I'd watch Moonlighting, Cheers. I mean, I wouldn't watch MASH because that was time to, you know, go to sleep or whatever. Plus that opening song is kind of like Little House on the Prairie. As soon as them shows come on, I'm like, oh man, there's got to be something else to do. I gotta go outside or go to sleep or whatever. But you know, and like Perfect Strangers. There was one TV show would come on I always thought was going to be real cool. I think it was The Equalizer. You know, shows like people getting beat up and it's got this like cool techno music and there was like a silhouette of a guy standing by this car and it's getting closer and it's getting closer and it's getting closer. And then when the light hits, it's like, I think it's the butler from the Christian Bale Batmans or whatever. I mean, it's some old dude, you know. And I'd try to watch it, you know, or some Murder, She Wrote would be on. I'm like, man, I got to go sleep. But, you know, I'd watch stuff like that. And that's what you did. That's why a lot of us, people from the 80s or before, a little after, you know, you just watch what was on. You didn't have whatever you want all the time, which makes it even worse because, I mean, I'm sure everybody else will sit around, you know, the Netflix and chill where you scroll for half an hour just trying to find something. And it's amazing to have almost anything you want at your fingertips. I mean, if you got Prime, you got Netflix, and I got stuff like the Night Flight channel because I got Apple TV on all my TVs. The Night Flight, the Eternal Family. Then you get the free stuff on Tubi if you want. If you got the codes from your Vudu or Fandango at home is what they call it now. You know, you get all your stuff. Paramount, Peacock, you know, HBO Max. If you have all of those channels and you can't find something, it's just because there's too much stuff to watch. And your brain can't handle it, I don't think. And not to mention the young kids, like my kids, you know, they just watch TikTok, Reels, and YouTube. You know, it's almost like pulling teeth to say, hey, why don't you sit down and just watch a real episode of a show and watch commercials? And they can't do it. And what's even worse, we've got every one of those channels. And I think I was trying to watch, it was about a month ago, I think I was trying to watch Lost Boys because my wife had never seen Lost Boys. And I was like, you ain't never seen Lost Boys? Well, we need to watch it. No, you can rent it. You can rent it for $4.99 or buy it for $9.99. I was like, nah, I can go get the Blu-ray at like a disc replay for, you know, $3 and we'll own it. But it's crazy to have all them channels and you still can't watch something, you know. It's like, or, you know, I know some of the boutiques are like Garbage Pail Kids or Dirt Bike Kid ain't going to be floating around on these channels. But it's just like, there's so much to watch. I mean, you just can't find nothing. It's crazy. So anyway, I made my way from antenna TV in the 80s to current every app on your TV and finding nothing to watch. But I'm going to move on. Number 5 is Short Circuit. You know, I watched this a lot when I was a kid. You know, Johnny Five, Your Mother's a Snowblower. You know, Mahoney is in it. You know, Steve Guttenberg, Ali Sheedy from Breakfast Club. She's in this. And what's the guy's name? It's the guy that's playing the Indian. He was in Succession. You know, he's one of those office or corporate guys in Succession, and he's playing the Indian. You know, and I guess there's people that they try to say there's some outrage for it. I'm gonna tell you what. Back in the day, if you would have asked me if that guy was a real Indian, I would have bet the house. Yes, that's how good an actor this guy was. You know, I don't know why they didn't pick a real, you know, Indian, Iraq type person or whatever to play that character. But that actor played it to the T, you know. I would have swore he was an Indian, you know. But basically Short Circuit, you know, like I said, that robot, he how can I put this? Actually, I think I got something in my notes here. Let's see here. I got, you know, basically the movie is about the government, you know, making these robots to be super soldiers so we don't, you know, pit real people out, you know, on the battlefield. And one of them, due to advanced AI, turns off his power and he's still alive somehow. He's sentient. Short Circuit back in 1986 got the advanced AI where the robot, takes control of itself. Wait till we get to Terminator 2 and we talk about Skynet. This might have been a precursor to some of that. Which actually, which Terminator was it? There's a Terminator that has like the T-100s. Terminator 3 where they have like a prototype before they get to the endoskeletons. They kind of look like Johnny Five, I guess try to pay a little homage to, I guess, what they ripped off. I don't know. But, another thing I remember about this movie, all the robots that aren't alive, they're still controlled by the government or whatever. Like Johnny Five reprograms them and they're like the Three Stooges. They're like, smacking each other and making all the Three Stooge noises, Stuff like that I remember, as a kid, That's another one, like I said, another movie that's trying to hit kids and adults so they get all of us. Get all the money from all the demographics. I had to write this down because I saw a picture. When I was going through some pictures, when Short Circuit come out, we had this little cardboard standee thing. It wasn't like a big one. It wasn't like the Nightbreed or the Nightmare on Elm Street 5, a Dream Child. It was just a little, just a little one that goes on the counter next to the cash register. It had Johnny Five, and it said like, Short Circuit coming to video soon or whatever, TriStar, whoever put it out. And I remember, after a month or two that movie come out, I asked my parents like, hey, can I have that? And they were like, yeah, take it home. Because like I said before, the video store is just a business. All that free stuff they'd get, just trash it. They didn't save nothing. Give it to people or sell it to people eventually. I rarely got to take stuff home that I really wanted. I don't know why they were like that, but yeah, I got to take that little cardboard and I think I cut it out so it wasn't on the base. Put it with my Transformers. I act like Johnny Five's on the battlefield with Optimus Prime and my G.I. Joes and play with it until my mom was cleaning my room and was like, oh, what's this? And threw it away. She'd always do that. But I remember that about Short Circuit. That's all my memories about Short Circuit, Good film. I haven't watched it in a while. I think I remember part 2 more because that's when he gets the punk rock look, gets the spikes and the earring or whatever and has that, I can't think of it right now, there's like a real popular song where he's like what is that? World Needs a Hero or We Need a Hero or something, Mike and the Mechanics type song or something for him. Anyway, we'll get to it. I'm sure Short Circuit 2 is going to show up. But anyway, moving on to number 4 is going to be a movie I don't have any history with. Down and Out in Beverly Hills. It's got Richard Dreyfuss, Nick Nolte, and Bette Midler. Now, I'm going to tell a quick story about Bette Midler here in a minute. It has nothing to do with this movie, but when I was trying to do a little research, and I was like, oh, Bette Midler, I've got something I can talk about that maybe people will enjoy. Don't even have nothing to do about a video store, but, it could be funny to some of y'all. But when I was doing my research on it, I guess Nick Nolte's like a homeless dude, tried to kill himself, drown himself in Richard Dreyfuss's pool, and I think they take him in for a while, try to, rehab him or help him out, and from what I read, there's a bunch of an affairs going on, people sleeping with other people and whatever, and eventually, I guess Nick Nolte leaves with their dog, because I think he was depressed because his dog died, and he was fibbing to Richard Dreyfuss about being wealthy and, whatever. I'm just going by the synopsis. I'm never going to watch this movie, and apparently it had a TV series when Fox started up back in the 80s, had like one season of Down and Out Beverly Hills. I don't remember it. So, but speaking of Bette Midler, I'm gonna tell a quick story that has something to do with something. So going on with this Bette Midler story, I want to tell. Way back in 1999, it could have been 2000. I worked for a company, and there was a bunch of us guys working together. And there's this guy, I'm not going to name his name. I know he's not going to be watching this. I mean, he could have passed away by now. He was older than me. But at the time, him and his wife's anniversary was coming up. And he's wanting to go out of town. And there was a bigger city close to us that I used to frequent that, he just never really went to for some reason. He's like, well, I think I'm gonna take my wife, up here, and do you got any recommendations on where to take her? I want to take her out somewhere nice. Now in our area, which every place might have this, we had this little magazine called News for You. Back then it would just advertise what concerts are coming, where you can go eat, what bars to go to, this and that. Well, in this magazine, I remember there was an advertisement at this club. Well, maybe I don't want to give it away. I'm gonna tell you kind of how it went. I told him, I said, yeah. I said, I know a place you can go. I wrote down the directions, because this is back, nobody had cell phones back in. I mean, you might have a Nokia, but it's not like today. It's still, you just had to know where you were going or use a map. I gave him the directions, and like I said, it wasn't far from where we were at. I said, go here and here, and here's the address, and here's the name of the establishment. I'm not going to give away the name. Like I said, I try not to pinpoint the area that I'm in or the radius, whatever, because I want everybody to kind of think of their own town when they think when I'm telling these stories or whatever. True stories, but stories. So he takes his wife and he goes to this place. And I'd almost forgotten about it. I was thinking, he probably won't even go there anyway. They'll just stop and go get a steak somewhere, because he didn't seem like the type that wanted to go to a club and, get shots or drink or anything. Which, thinking about it, I'll be able to tie this into a movie quote, not a quote, but something to do with a movie we've talked about. So we get back to work the next day. We get there, and I'm in the office, and we're me and some of my coworkers were just talking. All of a sudden, the door slams open. Boom. He's like, he's cussing. He's like, where you sent me? I was like, did you really go there? And he's like, hell yes. He's saying some other words. He's like, hell yes, I went there. He said, me and my wife show up. There's like a $10 cover charge, which, I ain't gonna say he had a lot of money, and it's anniversary time. I guess every penny counts, and this is $19.99. I guess $10 to get into a place in our area. I guess it's kind of expensive. So he said I paid $10 to get into this place. I walk in. I made it about 2 rooms in, and I looked at the wall. And you want to know why it cost $10 to get in? And I was like, I already knew why. But I'm younger at the time. Like, I wouldn't do this to nobody today. Looking back on it, I probably shouldn't have done it. But I played stupid. I was like, no, man, why? There was like a drag queen show, and the troupe or the group was called the Bette Midlers. It was a bunch of, guys that, cross-dressed as Bette Midler and had, the wigs and, the fake boobs or whatever, And, like I said, that's your thing. I know during that time, a lot of girls I knew used to like going to see those shows and stuff, But he was a country boy, so him and his wife came up to this place, and he didn't play that stuff. And they walked in, and he started looking around. And I'm already like, man, this place had looked like the Blue Oyster Bar from Police Academy to him. And he paid that money to get in, and he said like the bartender called him a big boy or something, and he said he stormed out and he was mad. But anyway, I'm trying to keep it PG on here, because I could tell this story way better, especially with all the stuff he said. But I was a punk kid at the time, so I didn't care. I was laughing at it. He actually went through with all that, But he's mad. He was out $20 and whatever. They went somewhere else, and I'm sure his wife was fine with it. She probably wanted to watch it, but yeah, there was the drag queens called the Bette Midlers, and when I was reading this, I was like, yeah, I've got a Bette Midler story, because I don't have any history with this movie at all, and I never will, But anyway, moving on to the number 3 rental of 1986 is a Raw Deal, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Now, I'm going to insert a picture here. There's actually a picture of me wearing a Raw Deal t-shirt while my dad's watching boxing on TV. Like I said, I've mentioned that big satellite dish before. I don't remember how it used to be back in the day. Like if you just point at certain distance, you just get the show for free, or if you had to pay for stuff. Because that's how we watched Mike Tyson fights back in. So I'm gonna put it up here. Like I said, there's a picture of me. I think I'm pretend boxing, but I'm wearing this Raw Deal T-shirt. Of course, back then, if you ordered a movie, man, these companies would send you all kinds of memorabilia and stuff. You get, of course, I'm a kid, so of course they sent a free T-shirt, and it's like a size small. Wasn't like an adult extra large or whatever. Get a poster, some cardboard stuff maybe. But anyway, this movie's about Arnold Schwarzenegger. I think he's like a FBI guy who got kicked out. Anyway, he's no longer working for the government or whatever, and I think they give him a chance to get back in if he takes out this drug lord or gangster or something. So it's kind of different. I actually watched it not too long ago. Speaking of buying VHSs, I picked up an Anchor Bay special edition VHS of Raw Deal, which once again, you figure I'd be smart enough to keep a lot of stuff around my area so I could show you. I'll just take a picture of it and I'll insert it. But if you're used to Arnold Schwarzenegger from like Predator, Terminator, or any of the 90s stuff, it's a little bit different watching him in this movie. He's kind of at the height of his action stardom, his physique. Conan was years before, but like the first Terminator is different than Terminator 2. Raw Deal, Red Heat, Arnold's a different guy than what we would know in the late 80s and early 90s. But you want to watch an action movie, Arnold, Raw Deal's a good movie to watch. It's just not something you just go to all the time. You don't think Raw Deal whenever you think of Arnold Schwarzenegger. You might think, I don't know, Last Action Hero or something. But anyway, that's like I said, that's all I got for that. Total Recall. You think about Arnold Schwarzenegger, Total Recall, Predator, Terminator 2, whatever. He's a little different in this movie. And speaking of action movies, number 2 is Cobra with Sylvester Stallone. This is another good action movie. I've watched it maybe twice, and not back in the day either. I never watched this on TV. I never took the VHS home. I mean, I used to look at the box all the time. It's got, Sly Stallone on the front holding that gun or whatever. But I picked up a Shout Factory Blu-ray of this. A lot of movies I bought not too long ago, and that's when I finally watched it. And actually listened to the commentary on it. I learned that Stan Bush, who wrote, You Got the Touch, it's, Transformers the movie, was really meant for this movie, but they ended up going with something else, some other songs, which I noticed this movie had a kind of a good synth 80s kind of vibe to it. So, but anyway, Sylvester Stallone, he's fighting this occult or something. That's basically what it is. He's fighting this, I don't know if they want to call them the satanic cult or Scientology cult or whatever they are. But anyway, I know the Mortal Kombat Annihilation, that actor, he's got those weird cheekbones or whatever. So that's what that's where I know him from. I know he's been in some other stuff. His name is Rain Thompson. That's what I got written down. But anyway, like I said, it's a good movie to watch once. It's not something I go back to all the time. But because Sylvester Stallone, Rambo and Rocky was his bread and butter during this time. This is, kind of something, I guess, in between those. And finally, oh yeah, also in Cobra, I want to mention he was married to Bridget Nielsen. She was Red Sonja or whatever. And when I was reading this, because he's fighting a new world order cult is what it is. I know I was goofing around saying it was satanic or Scientology or whatever, but it was actually a new world order cult, and he fights that actor Rain Thompson. But Bridget Nielsen's in it, and I was reading her name and I'm like, she was Red Sonja, but the only way I know her is being Flavor Flav's woman from that reality TV show. That's about the most I've ever seen of her, you know, because I wasn't watching a lot of these movies back in the day. So I was reading up on this movie, and I was like, man, Sylvester Stallone was married to her, and then she went and hooked up with, you know, Flavor Flav a decade or two later, you know. Like, man. But anyway, moving on to number one is Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Now, I've talked about the staying power, or like earlier, like how long a VHS will be in a catalog that you can buy. It wasn't like, man, you better buy it now because next month that's it. You know, no, like years and years you could buy the movie for, you know, whatever it cost. Temple of Doom, you know, this movie came out to theater in 1984. So we're talking, you know, two and a half years before the VHS even came out to rent, you know, because back then, you know, movie, if it was doing good, it will stay in, as long as it's making money, it will stay in the theater. It's not like today where, like, The Longest Walk, you know, I was able to, you know, rent that for, you know, $20 or whatever on my TV about 3 weeks after it actually hit the theater. And there's another that's got like Marlon Wayans in it. I guess it flopped hard, but I remember that, like, I think the week it came out, it was already able to be watched at home, you know. So a big difference from back then to today, you know, with theatrical releases. Like I said, I'm not the biggest Indiana Jones fan, but what I do remember about it, you know, they're walking across that rope bridge and it gets cut and then they hold on to it and slam it to the side of the mountain. And I don't know, man, for these movies that I didn't watch a whole bunch, you know, I still have memories of the Indiana Jones movies and creating phobias, or, you know, like, man, I hope I never have to walk across a rope bridge because, you know, I don't want it to snap and fall like it did on him. But there's one scene in this movie where I think they're in an airplane and it runs out of gas or it gets shot up and the engine goes out, whatever happens. But what I do remember is that there's like his life raft boat and he's just like, all right, get in and hold on. And they float that sucker out the airplane. They just hit hard going down the mountain or the snow or whatever it was. And that airplane's blown up in the background on the mountain. And I'm just like, man, even as a kid, I'm like, there's no way you could survive that fall, especially on that little life raft. But I mean, you know, that makes a good, you know, action movie, fantasy action movie. And I know they had that tiki shaman guy in it, you know. He didn't look very indigenous to me or whatever he's supposed to be. He just kind of looked like some dude's uncle, you know, drunk at a party. So that's really my memories for Temple of Doom. Not a whole bunch. This tape might also come out because I remember you know, the previous one came out for like $39.99, which was cheap for a VHS back in. So surely this one followed suit, you know, because they wanted, you know, get as much money as you can out of it. But yeah, them using that life raft and just hitting the ground running. that's what I remember most about this one. But before we go, I'm also going to touch on some theatrical releases because, you know, we'll end up talking about these in the future. And some of them, even if they don't end up the top 10, we will be talking about them because, especially this first one, Rad, came out to theaters in '86, you know, and it flopped, but it didn't flop on home video at all. And its longevity, you know, its cult status. You know, I was a BMX kid as a child. You know, I had a cool bike. It wasn't a mongoose, but I had those, you know, the plastic rims around my wheels and the chrome body. And we had a BMX track at our park. Our local park used to have it was maybe more for dirt bikes, but they'd have these bicycle BMX contests too. And my dad took me to a few of them. And then, you know, during the week or there ain't no event, you can just go out there and ride around. And my dad would, you know, throw my bicycle in the back of the S10 and we'd drive down and he'd let me jump the ramps and the hills and ride the dirt track, you know. And he'd just sit out there and watch me or do whatever he was doing. But, of course, they got rid of it. They don't have that anymore. They actually got rid of that back before the 90s hit. And I remember being real sad, like, man, they took away the BMX track, why? But so Rad had come out in 1986. GoBot's Battle of the Rock Lords come out. We did not have this at my video store, but this was at my uncle's video store, and I would always be like, hey, can I borrow this, take it home? Now, this ain't in the same town. If I took it, it was going to be gone for months until we seen them again, So I'd borrow that and take it home. We'd bring it back, a month or two later. Um, that's memories. We'll get more deeper into the GoBots. Rock Lord toys were kind of, they're just rocks. They transform real easy. It's just like fold the legs and the arms, and there you go. Kind of a flop. I think it might have been what did the GoBot brand in, besides being like the Matchbox to the Hot Wheel, for Transformers. Critters come out in 1986, little porcupine monsters. A quick memory of that, some bounty hunters, they land and they hit that video store, and that one guy's going to morph into Freddy Krueger because there's that like Nightmare on Elm Street standee, and I'm like, man, but he doesn't. Of course, the other person morphs into that playmate or whatever, the hot chick. So, but we'll get into more of that later. Maximum Overdrive come out to theater in 1986. Got that AC/DC soundtrack. I used to play drums. Of course, DT, probably the first song I was able to play because it's really not that hard. I also played baseball, Little League, when I was younger, and also into middle school and stuff. And there's that part where those kids were playing baseball and the soda machine starts shooting the cans out. And I was thinking, man, it'd be great if I was somewhere and they started shooting out free Pepsis or Cokes out. I'd be grabbing them. But of course, when that steamroller runs over that kid, I'm like, man, I hope that never happens to me. Have a nightmare as a child, a steamroller getting you. Labyrinth come out in 1986. David Bowie. What can I say about that? I'm sure we're going to talk a whole lot about that in the next video or two. Flight of the Navigator come out. That's another movie that like everybody knew about, and then it's kind of unknown now. I don't even know if it's on Disney Plus because it's a Disney movie now, or it was. And it give you a nightmare as a kid because you'd be like, well, if I got lost and then everybody grew up and then I was missing, and they tried putting me in that, at NASA state, that wherever they were doing, keeping track of them, at medical facility or whatever you want to call it. But Flight Navigator was cool back in the day. And of course, Transformers, the movie, come out in 1986. Excuse me. We will have a whole video or series about the Transformers coming up. I don't want to talk about it too much. I mean, I'm a fan. I've got an old school Rhino DVD with, 3 or 4 of the voice actors' signatures on it. So, I went to BotCons and stuff back in the day. Huge Transformers fan. So, I don't want to get too deep into that. The Boy Who Could Fly come out in 1986 to theaters. That's something I saw on TV a whole bunch. It's got I don't know that actor's name, but the boy who could fly. He was in like a scary movie later on called Sleep Stalker or whatever, like a Sandman monster guy. I just remember watching it a whole bunch when I was younger. Trick or Treat come out with Skippy and Ozzy and Gene Simmons. We'll get into that movie too. It just come out here not too long ago. Got a 4K release from Red Shirt Pictures. Of course, I got a copy of it because I had that DVD for a long time, and you'd flip it on the back side, and like the picture on the back was like the makeup artist making a fake Sammy Kerr. And of course, the cover's got Ozzy from Osmosis or No More Tears, and Gene Simmons from like the Domino video shoot or something on the front. They don't look like it in the movie at all, and they're barely in it. Well, Gene Simmons is in it a lot more than Ozzy is, but anyway, we'll get into that stuff later on. And then Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 come out to theater. This was the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre I ever saw. I didn't see part 1 until later on in life, but part 2, because we had the video store, and it has that box kind of ripping off the Breakfast Club. And there's a guy that got an argument with me years ago because he had some other version where it's like there's a saw coming through a door and it says Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, and he was like, well, this was the main one that everybody had. And I'm like, anytime any video store I went into that had Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 had that Breakfast Club rip-off cover. So, but anyway, I watched that a lot younger, or way younger than I should have been when I seen that, old plate head and all that stuff. So, but anyway, that's about all I got for this episode, or this video episode. Like I said, I got me a backdrop now. I can change some of my posters out. I just got this room not too long ago because my kids are getting older. They're all moving out. They're out of college. You know, they don't want to be at home, which I wouldn't either. I mean, when I was younger, you know, when I turned 18, I was gone. I wanted to be on my own, you know, stay up when I want, be loud, listen to music loud, or, you know, just do my own thing. I might have been more wild than my kids are. But like I said, a lot of my kids moved out, so now I'm starting to get all these extra bedrooms in my house. And, you know, I'm going to try to turn this one into a YouTube studio or whatever. You know, I'm going to get a better camera and better lights and more stuff up. I am getting ready to start working for a new company next week, so it might be a little bit longer before I get my next video out until I get my schedule set up. But anyway, like I said, you got any questions or anything, put them in the comments. You got any memories of the movies we went over, or any kind of, you know, history with any of this, you know, be sure to put it in the comments, you know, subscribe. I am in this for the long haul. I will make videos, even if they don't come out once a week. You know, my thought when I started this was, man, I want 2 videos every week, because this can stretch out, I ain't gonna say forever, because eventually I would like to have guests, you know, round tables, and talk about movies with different people, because every movie is different to somebody. You know, it ain't the same for every single person. My memories of, you know, Transformers the movie could be a way different than somebody else, or, you know, somebody else that don't really care. You know, they'd be like, you know, who cared about a cartoon semi dying? You know, what's the big deal with that? You know. But anyway, like I've said before, I'll see you the next time, and be sure to be kind and rewind.